Tokia, miyan kikansan, miwile pana e sona pi Toki Pona. Hi, I'm Greg Den 3, and I want to teach you about Toki Pona. Today, we're going to be doing the object lesson, talking about the grammatical particle e and all of its most important uses. So, for starters, we're going to introduce all of the new words for this lesson. And of course, center stage is the word itself, e, drawn with these two arrow symbols. It is very similar to the word li that we covered in the previous lesson. So that's e, and it's spelled with just the letter e. Again, these two arrow symbols. And e's purpose is to mark a grammatical object. It indicates where the verb ends and the object begins, in a sense. You can say that it allows somebody to act on another object, and that is its purpose in a sentence in Toki Pona. We have the word wile, which is spelled W-I-L-E. Wile is to want or need. It refers to any kind of wants or needs, right? It's not quite the same as you must do this, but it does express the idea of needs as in I need food, I need water, and it expresses the idea of wants as in I want this game, I want to go play. Ideas like that. Next, we have lukin, drawn with this I, and that is spelled L-U-K-I-N. That's lukin. And lukin is both to view, to look, and it refers to eyes. This is something that's interesting about Toki Pona. The various sensory words in it both refer to the sense itself, here, to look, and to the part of your body that does that kind of sensing. Next, we have lipu, drawn with just this square shape that's a bit taller than it is wide. That's L-I-P-U. Lipu refers to documents, papers, cards, any sort of small, flat thing. It can also refer to leaves on a tree. And then we have sona, which is drawn like lipu, including the box being taller than it is wide, but similar to the word toki, it has emitters over the top. Sona is spelled S-O-N-A. Sona. And sona refers to knowledge, understanding, information of all different kinds. Next, we have the word pali. That's P-A-L-I. And pali is drawn, again with this symbol that means hand, which we haven't quite gotten to yet. But it's drawn with this symbol hand, similar to the word moku. And then it has drawn with this small circle overhead. Again, pali. And pali is to work or create. You could say you create a document, create a textbook, create a work of art. You could create a tool, or you could create a home. And then you can also say you work at your workplace. Pali covers both of these ideas. Next, we have kute, which is drawn as this abstract representation of an ear, and that is spelled K-U-T-E. And as you might be able to guess based on the picture and the fact that it looks like an ear, kute has to do with both hearing, listening, and ears. In the same way as lukin, kute refers to both the sense and the part of your body that does that kind of sense. Kute, K-U-T-E. Next, we have yo, which I imagine like a person looking down into their hands. But if you draw it something like this with a little circle and then a shape coming down and around and then in, either of these representations will get you the idea. You have yo, which is spelled J-O. Yo is to have, hold, or possess. And we'll get to this idea in later lessons and in this one, but just for reference, to have, hold, or possess something does not mean the same as it does in English. In English, you could say, have a good time, but in Toki Pona, you couldn't say, have a time. You couldn't have any kind of time. However, you can have something in your hands, you can own something and therefore say you have it, and you can have it as part of your body. You can say you have hands and you have hair. You cannot have times, events, etc. That is yo. Continuing, we have pana. One more time, we have the symbol for hand coming up again. Now we have emitters over it, like we did with Toki and with Sona. In this case, pana, that is P-A-N-A, pana has to do with giving. It can be any kind of giving, not just the literal act of passing something from one person's hands to another, but also the idea of giving a gift, emitting an object, such as light. It can be any kind of giving. It's also fairly common to refer to teaching as pana e sona. Mind you, that's an incomplete sentence, but you can say you give knowledge. Pana. Next, we have pakala. That's P-A-K-A-L-A. Pakala is drawn similarly to lipu, but with a crack or maybe a lightning bolt down the center. Pakala has to do with things that are broken, destroyed, smashed, absolutely in pieces. Something that can be ruined, or it can refer to small kinds of broken things, like, oh, I've made a mistake. Next, we have pilin. That's P-I-L-I-N. And pilin refers to both the act of feeling something, as in to touch or to be in contact with, and it refers to emotional feelings, whether you are happy, sad, scared, feeling well, not feeling well, etc. Pilin lets you talk about your feelings and the things you are literally touching. And it's drawn as a heart. All right, and then we have one more, and that is ante. A-N-T-E. Ante is drawn with two arrows pointing one up and one down, facing one another. And ante has to do with change, difference. It refers to anything which is different. You can, for example, change another thing, or you can refer to things which are different from others. That's all the words we'll be going over for this lesson. So, the new grammar of this lesson, as I opened up with, is the word e. E lets you indicate an object, something that we're modifying in the course of the sentence. And so our grammar now looks something like this. We have sentences in which the subject is me, or the subject is sina. We have some verb or adjective. And then we have a object. So we have me or sina, verb or adjective, a object. In a very general form, you might say the speaker or the listener do something to something else. They apply some action to something else. And of course, we can also have the same kind of sentence where the subject, as with the word li, can be anything. And so we can say subject, li, verb / adjective, a, object. So we can talk about, like I said, what the speaker and listener do to other things, and we can talk about what other third-person things do to other things, including the speaker and listener, because me and Sina can appear in the object position. So let's go over a couple of quick examples of what that might look like. Let's say we have the sentence, mi pona e yan. Mi pona e yan. Well, here, our yan, the object of the sentence, becomes pona in some way. Pona is applied to yan. Let's have our arrow pointing from pona to yan. The yan becomes pona, and that can be done in any particular way. If we say mi pona e yan, it can refer to helping somebody. It can refer to improving somebody in any particular way, such as by giving them knowledge. It can refer to healing people, taking care of people, making people feel better, right? In some way, yan becomes pona. And, of course, our subject, me, here, is applying that to yan. That's the important thing here, is that e says this verb applies to this object. Here, we have our speaker, and the entire sentence gives you information about what is being done and by who, right? Let's look at another one with a third person example. Let's say, lape li wawa e sina. Lape li wawa e sina. Now, once again, our object, sina, as in the listener, becomes wawa in some way. Various interpretations might be, let's say, sleep makes you stronger, or rest makes you confident, napping makes you energetic, or vacation empowers you, right? However you choose to interpret it, or whatever context tells you, the word wawa and all of its meanings are in some way applied to sina. We have our arrow again. And of course, since our subject here is a third-person subject, it can describe both an actor. We could say describe somebody else performing an action, but in this case, the subject is itself an action. And that's perfectly okay. Lape li wawa e sina. Sleeping makes you feel more powerful. Sleeping makes you stronger. But, very important note, not every case is like this. There are some cases, and we'll learn more complexities and details of this in the future, but there are some cases in which we don't apply something to the object. So let's look at what applies here. We can say, yan li pilin e kiwen. Yan li pilin e kiwen. Now, it may be tempting to point this arrow from pilin to kiwen and say, oh, the kiwen becomes pilin in some way. But while that's kinda sorta true, the rock is certainly felt or touched, it's a little disingenuous to say the rock now has that property, like was implied before. Instead, this is making more of a claim about what the subject is doing. The person, yan, is touching, and they're touching something. This is a very important note, and you'll get an intuitive sense for how this feels as you speak more Toki Pona and as you study further. But suffice to say, some Toki Pona words are like this, where when you apply them in this grammatical form, they still don't apply their properties to that object necessarily. Now, again, there's caveats to that, and we'll get into more detail in the future, but this is a good shorthand for what the truth is right now. Yan li pilin e kiwen. The kiwen is touched, but it doesn't become pilin in any way. Let's look at another quick example of that. Let's say, mi wile e telo. Once again, wile looks like it would apply to telo and make the telo huile in some way. But as a matter of fact, it does not. In this case, the speaker wants water, right? Mi huile e telo. However, the telo doesn't change as a result of that. It doesn't have huile applied to it. Now, again, this has caveats, and there are ways in which this can apply properties to telo as we get more advanced. So I'm going to continue into the exercises for this lesson. So our first example sentence is Moku li pona e sina. Moku li pona e sina. So let's think of a context in which this statement lives. We could say a parent is doing his best to make his kid eat dinner, and it results in an argument at the table. The kid offers the very reasonable point that vegetables are gross. But after some arguing back and forth, Mom chimes in with some convincing wisdom. Moku li pona e sina. Food makes you feel better. And we can see the purpose of that wisdom, right? We're saying here, yeah, food will make you feel better. And it doesn't have to just literally make you feel better. It can heal you. It can make you grow, although that may be better expressed with other words. Let's go on to another example. Mi sona e lipu. Mi sona e lipu. Let's say you've been struggling in class, trying your hardest to follow along with lessons and labs. You hire a tutor to help you, and they provide well-practiced teaching and piles of useful examples. Late one night, you're poring over the textbook, and you realize you actually understand every word. And then you say to yourself, Mi sona e lipu. I understand the textbook. I get the knowledge of this document. It's worth mentioning here that, of course, all these different contextual examples are a learning aid of sorts. Toki Pona, I think, more than any other language that I've experienced, demands the context that it lives in, right? It's hard to truly understand a Toki Pona sentence without all of the information that lives around where that statement was said and why it was said. If your speaker says mi sona e lipu out of context, well, you don't know really what that lipu is. But you, sitting in this situation, struggling through class, getting a tutor, reading the textbook and realizing all of a sudden, oh, I get it. You have all the context to understand that sentence. There's a story to it. Whereas mi sona e lipu on its own doesn't really provide all that information. Let's go on to another one. This sentence will be mi, yo, e, kiwen. Mi, yo, e kiwen. Now, where does this statement live, so to speak? Let's say it's Halloween night, and you have a group of sheet-clad friends dressed like classic ghosts, walking from home to home, shouting trick or treat, getting piles of sweets in hand at each door. And then, at the end of the night, everyone compares what they've gotten. One friend pulls a weighty, dirty chunk from his bag and says, "Ah, miyo e kiwen. I got a rock." Certainly an unfortunate occurrence. So, this sentence, once again, not really all that helpful in its original form. Saying miyo e kiwen out of nowhere, without any other context supporting it, doesn't tell you a lot about really what's going on. Having this extra context live around this statement, I would say it colors the conversation. It makes it more interesting. And certainly, miyo e kiwen is not very funny, but it's pretty funny when you go look through your Halloween haul and you find yourself staring at a rock. Ah, miyo e kiwen. Let's go on to another example. Let's say Mama li lukin e sina. Mama li lukin e sina. So let's say that you and your brother are up to no good, trying to play a prank on the neighbor. You just finished setting up the sprinkler system to go off when your neighbor walks out of their home, and then your brother yells a warning out at you. Mama li lukin esina! Mama li lukin esina! Mom can see you! Dad can see you! Our parents can see you! You are in danger, right? You have been caught and your prank is about to be undone. Next example. Let's say telo li pali e ko. And remember, pali here, drawn with the symbol for hand and then a circle. Ko, drawn with a sort of blobby shape. It has a lot of interpretation to it. So let's see, where does this sentence live? Let's examine it in a vacuum first, right? Telo li pali e ko. Well, we have our liquid of some kind, and though it's not necessarily correct to assume it's always water, it is pretty common that telo does refer to water, given that water is so frequent around us, right? So let's say maybe this is water, and we're creating something, since pali is applying to something else, with this word e in the middle, and then ko. Ko, as we've noted before, we have mud, goop, sludge, and we also have dust, particulate, gravel, itty-bitty pieces, right? Ko. Okay. Somehow, water is creating mud? Goo? Well, how about a context? Let's say you're standing out on the beach in a late summer evening, watching the waves roll in. And as time passes, and only the moon is left illuminating the surface of the water, you begin to notice a soft white foam piling at the water's edge. And you remark to yourself, telo li pali e ko. The waves are making foam. Now, this tells us something really, really important about the interpretation of words in Toki Pona, which is that their literal interpretation, their most basic interpretation, is not really all that helpful, right? It would be correct to say this sentence, even in context, is water creates foam. That's accurate, but it's not just water itself that's making the foam, it is the waves crashing on the shore, right? It's the waves. And the waves are a kind of telo, right? They're made of liquid. In fact, they're made of water, right? So it wouldn't really be the most accurate thing to say this is just water. It is, in fact, the waves creating that foam. And so that's the lesson to take from this particular sentence, which is that the general form of these words is helpful for a learning tool, but it's not so helpful for context. If you remove the information about it being the waves, you've lost something important. And while it may look on the surface that this Toki Pona sentence does do that, again, that information lives in the context. So let's go on to another one. Sina pakala e musi. Sina pakala e musi. So let's say you and your friends are playing hide and seek, and your friend, who is it, they're standing at the base of a tree, but they're only really pretending to close their eyes while they're counting. And so as soon as the game starts, they rush to tag everybody they saw hide, and then when the game ends, everybody complains at once, Sina pakala e musi! You ruined the game! That's no fun. Now, this is important because pakala, as I noted while I was introducing the words, has a broader interpretation than just to destroy, right? It can be minor mistakes, it can be flat out destruction of things, you can shatter a vase into pieces, and you can just ruin a game. All of these things are things pakala can refer to. Another example. Let's say Sina ante e lipu. Sina ante e lipu. Let's say you are a project manager. You're working with one of your developers on a new project, and the developer comes to you with a problem, and as you're working through that problem, you figure out the issue. One of the tools has a change you don't recognize. You check who made that change, and then you inform the confused developer, Sina ante e lipu. You changed the code. You changed the document. You could, in a similar vein, express this idea with Sina pakala. You made a mistake. Both of these sentences get at the same idea, right? In this situation, the speaker is telling the listener, hey, you did something wrong. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. Again, pakala doesn't refer to necessarily large kinds of brokenness or mistakes. It can refer to small ones too. But they're getting at the idea that, yeah, the listener has done something and there was a problem about it. All right. How about Sina pilin e ko? Sina pilin e ko. So let's say on your walkthrough of a science museum, you find yourself in a hands-on exhibit full of boxes. You can't see what's inside any of the boxes, but the organizer directs you to reach in and feel. You reach into a box and feel something gushy and rubbery. You squish it, but you have no idea what it is. And then the organizer tells you, oh, you're feeling the gum. You're touching the gum. There's a wad of gum in that box. And maybe in a similar vein, you could totally say, Sina pilin e yaki. Although maybe as the organizer, I wouldn't want to tell the person Sina pilin e yaki. While there isn't necessarily a negative connotation to yaki, certainly it would be unpleasant to be told you're touching something gross. Next, we have two separate sentences to describe one situation. Kasi li wile e pona. Mi pona e kasi. Kasi li wile e pona. Mi pona e kasi. Let's say you're walking through the forest toward your personal getaway, a cozy cabin far from home. When you get there, you find the cabin in disrepair. Vines now creep up the sides, and weeds overgrow most of the garden. The home is clearly starved of the care you were giving it. So you resolve to restore the garden and the cabin, and remark to yourself, Kasi li wile e pona. Mi pona e kasi. Now this is fun because these two sentences are interrelated ideas, and we'll get into how this works where you can specifically relate these two ideas with specific structures that exist in Toki Pona. But for now, having the two sentences side by side gives you that much more information about what the speaker is feeling. And the speaker realizes, hey, the garden needs help. I'm going to help the garden. Let's do a couple of English to Toki Pona examples. Let's do, I'm making a fire. Well, first thing to note, our subject is first person. So that is me. Making, well, that's a kind of creation, isn't it? So let's say pali. And then here, the subject is saying they're making something specific. They're creating some specific object. It's not just the act of creation in a vacuum. They're making something. Okay, so we're going to need the word e to indicate what is being made. And then we have fire. Fire, heat, temperature. That's the word seli. Mi pali e seli. Let's do another one. How about you spilled something on the book? You spilled something on the book. Well, we have our subject, you. So let's say that's Sina. Go ahead and throw that in there. And then we have a book that is being acted on here. So let's say we throw in lipu at the end. But what does it mean to spill something on the book? Well, in this case, we have dirtied it, made it gross. Okay, Sina yaki lipu. You made the book gross. You spilled something on the book. Now, it's worth mentioning that the way this original English statement is constructed, there's a different way to express it in Toki Pona that involves more advanced grammatical concepts that we haven't learned yet. However, this is, just as well, a way to express this same idea. So let's say, for our final sentence here, the man is listening to something different. You'll have to forgive my handwriting there, but the man is listening to something different. Well, for starters, our subject is not me or Sina. This is talking about some third person. And here, we can just go ahead and pop in the word yan. Of course, yan refers to any kind of person, not just men, not just women. And so, though it does technically lose a little information, we do know when we say yan, we're referring to a specific person in context, right? So yeah, the man, that's yan. And since this is a third person subject, it needs li. Yan li. Okay. Well, what is the person doing? What is the man doing? He's listening. That's kute. Yan li kute. And then they're listening to something different. Now, there are, again, more precise or clear ways to express this idea, but for the time being, we're going to say they're listening to ante. And, of course, this literal interpretation, yan likute ante, there are different ways to think about that aren't just this exact sentence. But this is at least one reasonable way to translate this English sentence into Toki Pona. All right. Let's do a quick roundup of everything we've learned so far, and then we are done. To review, Toki Pona sentences now look something like this, and I'm going to write it fairly generally, so give me just a moment. We have our subject that is always present. We have li, which might be there, but it isn't for me and Sina. We have a verb or adjective. We have and we have object. And of course, the object and with it are optional, right? Subject, li, verb, object. Me and Sina don't take li. And then the object is not always present. This is like the most general form of your Toki Pona sentence, and it's everything we've seen so far. And finally, a quick rundown on our tally of content words versus particles. In the last lesson, I talked shortly about how we have the particle li, which can't appear in other positions generally, and we also have now Both of these words serve exclusively grammatical purposes in Toki Pona. They don't provide any meaning of their own, they just tell you what the structure of the sentence is. And so long as that is true, again, generally, they don't appear in other positions in a sentence. And that's all I had for today. I hope you learned something cool. Thank you so much for listening.